Hello guys. So the last chapter we have discussed were involving the fundamental concept of probability, and now pretty much we know some of the basic rule about probability and the fundamental ideas how to use probability in various situations. And we so remember I told you guys that probability is probably the most difficult chapter that we have learned so far, but that is like the founding that's the foundation for us to learn the next topic through the entire semester. So we're gonna in the next two chapter, chapter 6 and chapter 7, we're gonna discuss two different type of probability distribution. And to understand the probability distribution, you have to have a basic understanding of probability. So it's again, let me remind you guys the importance of what we have learned from the previous chapter, and then we're gonna build on that. We're gonna apply what we learned from probability to talk about to discuss this idea of probability distribution. So for chapter 6, we're going to focus on a specific type of probability distribution, and it's called discrete probability distribution. So there's some terminology regarding regarding probability distribution. So let's discuss some new terminology first. So the first term that you see here is what we mean by random variable. The very first day of class, we discussed what it means to be a variable. And there's two main types of variable that we discussed. There's quantitative variable, which are things that can be measured. For example, like how tall you are, your height, right? Or how much you weigh, your weight. Those are measurement, and these are considered as quantitative variable. And then the other type of variable that we discussed was qualitative variable. And qualitative variable is what it does is classify the variable into different categories. So we also call it categorical variable. And it's about things that cannot be measured. For example, your gender or your ethnicity or your religion. Those are all qualitative variable. But for chapter 6, we will focus on chapter 6 and chapter 7. We will focus on quantitative variable, which are things that can be measured. And then, for this type of quantitative variable, we do divide into two different groups. One group is the continuous random variable. The other, which means the variable can be expressed as a decimal value. For example, how tall you are can be expressed as a decimal value. You could be 6.5 feet tall, and then the other variable would be the discrete random variable, which have to be whole number. And discrete random number could represent the number of siblings that you have, because the number of siblings that you have to be whole number. They cannot be a decimal value. So let's write out a couple of examples for a discrete random variable. So we just mentioned one. So the first example you could have here is, it's gonna be, let me erase this. So the number, right? The number of siblings that you have. So the discrete random variable is usually denoted by the symbol x. Okay, so we could have x or y or z. These are the letters that we usually use for discrete random variable. So for example, I could have, so here, the x represent the number of siblings that you have. So if you have, let's say, 3 siblings, then x would be equal to 3. Okay. And I have 2 siblings. So the number of siblings that I have is 2. So in this case, x could be equal to 2. X could be equal to 2. So x take on different value, right? Depending on, how many siblings that you have. And then for, that's one example. So let's think of another example. So let's think of a probability experiment. So a probability experiment here could be, let's say we roll a dice. Okay, let's roll a dice. And let the random variable let the random variable be the outcome that you get. Okay, so the outcome is the random variable. Okay, the outcome is the random variable. So in this case, your x, let's think about the different outcome for this x. So you could have x is gonna be, you could have, well, what this x could be. So what could this x be? So if you roll a dice and then you think about what are the possible outcomes that you have, this x could be equal to 1. You could get a 1, or 2, or 3, or 4, or 5, or 6. These are, so there's a total of 6 possible outcomes for this probability experiment, which means the possible value for x could be from 1 to 6. Okay, so that's what we mean by a discrete random variable. Now, continuous random variable are random variable whose the possible value can take on any value in an interval. Well, what does that mean is that it does not have to be a whole number. So let's try to come up with an example for this. So how about, let's try the random variable here, let's say, is how tall you are. Let's x be the height of a student. Okay, so in this case, you can see that this x, x could be, how tall a student is. X could be equal to 6.2 feet, right? Or x could also be equal to 5.9 feet. So there's, so you can see that the value of x here could take on a decimal value. It doesn't have to be a whole number. And here, let me be clear on this, that the x doesn't, these two values are not every possible value that could be for the height of a student, right? So here, there's infinitely many of these possible values, but there's only one that represents the height of a particular student. Okay, so how about, let's think of another example. You could be, let's call this b. How about let's x be the length of a river. Okay, the length of a river. Okay, so this x, again, it could take on decimal value as well. Okay, so hopefully, that's explained to you what do we mean by a discrete random variable and a continuous random variable.